Companies big and small are using AwareGo's human risk assessment to measure the human risk factor in cybersecurity. This interactive solution allows companies to measure employees' knowledge and behavior across threat vectors such as phishing, passwords, sensitive data, and more. After completing the assessment, CISOs can identify vulnerable departments and roles and improve internal policies or procedures. Visit securityweekly.com/AwareGo to start your free trial. Can your incident response technology collect from off-network endpoints? Xterra FTK Enterprise can. Endpoints are no longer located in a physical office, and organizations need a comprehensive investigation tool that enables holistic data collection and review. With FTK Enterprise, you can also scan for IOCs and MISP indicators. You can scan with Yara rules, and you can use integrations to trigger automatic endpoint collections. Visit securityweekly.com/Xterra for access to their white paper, Incident Response for a Remote World. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. And also, we would love if you leave us a review, send us an email, send us a tweet, let us know how it's going. How are we doing? Let us know. Apple Podcasts is one place you could leave reviews, but however you want to get that feedback to us, we'd love to hear from you. All right, now for the Enterprise Security Weekly News.
Great, Adrian.
Like and subscribe, please. Did this sound too desperate? Was that too desperate? All right. So the news here, if you want to follow along, you can go to securityweekly.com/ESW284, and you'll see all the articles we're going to talk about there. We usually don't get to all of them, but I try and put most of the the most interesting stuff that's showing up in my feeds on there. So it's good to skim through to see maybe some of the stuff we didn't cover that might be interesting to you. So no big fundings this week, no big surprise, because this week is Black Hat. And marketing and PR folks know that a lot of people are distracted. Any announcements that go out this week, there's a chance they'll be missed. So we're not seeing a bunch of huge, important announcements this week.
What a sad, sad state of affairs when we're considering 23 million, 22 million, etc., not funding.
Man, I mean, on a typical week, we've got like $1 billion in funding. And this is
but
this isn't even 100 million.
State of affairs.
This isn't even a tenth of the norm.
Well, that's because people are spending $1 billion on their booths at Black Hat and DEF CON.
Yes. Very true.
There's no money left over. It's just all gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's still stuff to talk about here, though. So the ones that we do get are Series A's, our seed fundings, our smaller fundings that aren't as big of a deal. But honestly, there's some of the more interesting ones because this is where you see new categories, new companies coming out of stealth, new ideas and stuff like that. And we continue to see a lot around data. So Normalyze, more and more of this data security posture management. These new data security startups have kind of taken over that CSPM term and created the DSPM term here. And Ryan Noreen kindly put together a list of some of those that we've seen pop up in the last year or so. Symmetry Systems, Vesa, Laminar, Security.ai, and Dig Security. So a whole bunch of these. And I don't know if they're all doing the same things exactly, but generally the ones I've looked into, they're going to discover your data, classify it, and then, as I mentioned in one of the previous interviews, this automatic enforcement that I don't think anybody's ever going to get to or actually do.
Well, we have at least two on the list here, Flow and Axio, who fall into that category.
Yeah,
They do sort
Flow.
of blend together after a while.
Yeah. So have you seen much of this? I know you guys tend to cover a lot of cloud and application security weekly. Have you been seeing the data security startups? Have you guys been talking about that much?
I'm an advisor in an early stage one, so I look at it from that point of view. It's an interesting space from the point of view of who actually buys these things. You have to have enough of an interest. You have to have enough of both an awareness as well as an awareness that your data is out there, right, in multiple clouds, probably almost everyone nowadays. But then now you know that you still have to care enough about it to go, I'm willing to spend money on this fairly niche thing to try and protect it and both be aware and, in that perfect world, to automate and turn it on. But it's I won't joke, it's a tough sell. These guys are getting traction. I think they're getting traction probably with just a part of what they're doing, probably the detection part, as you said. But I mean, even that sort of goes back to like my Docker days, right? Of when we first would show container image scans to a customer, and probably the same thing nowadays with not even nowadays, all throughout times of doing network scans. Like when people actually see what this is the exposure, that's when they sort of go, oh my God, we need to do something about this.
Yeah. Yeah, and back in the CASB days, the big push was shadow IT, and they would make that like a loss leader. Like they give you a free tool that you upload your firewall logs or proxy logs into, and it parses it out and it tells you here's where all your corporate data is going, into these SaaS tools that you've never heard of and certainly didn't approve at the corporate level. So yeah, I could see that happening here too, where maybe they have like part of the POC, or some kind of loss leader as they do the data discovery piece, and they tell you, here's how much payment data you have in places where it shouldn't be, maybe. So yeah, it's and the other thing that makes it kind of tough is you can't really do it as SaaS because people don't want sensitive, proprietary, regulated data leaving, their spaces. Whether it's, I don't think this is just cloud either with DSPM. I've seen some of the products here work in private data centers, hosted centers as well, where you're going to end up running some kind of appliance, EC2 instance, OVA, something like that. Like a lot of this is going to live on-prem. You're actually going to manage the infrastructure for these products because, usually it's a hard no, if you're doing any kind of, data analysis like this outside of the company-controlled systems.
That's sort of interesting. And I'm not on the sales side, like I'm, tech advisor, so I don't see that closely. But it seems like so much what I'll say we, and it's probably we in my bubble, but the we in my bubble are moving so much of our stuff to the cloud. And I agree with what you're saying to a degree of like, the keys to the kingdom are that type of thing you want close to home. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to see how this gets installed, if it is being installed as a SaaS or no, or consumed, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I guess my guess is their ideal customer is going to be somebody who's highly regulated, who has a lot to lose if the wrong data goes in the wrong place.
Yeah.
All right. Katie, you mentioned flow security also in the data space here. Have you had a chance to check that one out? Any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I read through this one. It's a smaller company. It looks like it's a startup. And again, it's in a space that companies need help, but there are a lot of problems historically with this space. There are a couple of problems, with people who've been burned by some of the DLP, data classification type of tools in the past. And looking at what this company does, of course, this is just a press release, so it doesn't go into too much technical detail, but It says it's a data in motion game changer, mapping data-related threats. So this is not a new problem. It's not a new approach to data security, but unfortunately, it just hasn't taken off. And I think this is definitely akin to the DSPM market. If it doesn't fit into there, I'm not sure there's a completely quantified definition of what DSPM is specifically. But if it looks similar, it smells similar, it tastes similar, it probably is the same thing. But there's not enough in this press release. But I think there's probably a little bit of battle wounds here in the data security space for a lot of people.
DLP shaped wounds.
Yes, DLP shaped wounds.
Yeah, and this is DLP 2.0. Like if I've read the marketing copy now for over half a dozen of these, and they all mention the same three phases: discover the data, classify the data, which is not regex anymore. It's they're building custom models. So then you can do your own. If you have some fancy special type of data that they don't have a pre-built classifier on, you can build it, whatever.
Well, in fairness, Adrian, you can take any security space and say these three things: discover, classify, protect, discover, classify, secure. And everybody's got that in their marketing materials. So it doesn't matter if it's data or network or apps or, whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, generally in security, you have to get awareness of the thing. Either you're running a network scan or, you have to know what you're dealing with first. I mean, certainly, I'd say a big chunk of the industry, the products do, kind of along those three lines, but it's tougher with data. And it's always been tougher with data. And it used to be my prediction when I was at 451 that data security was the very last hurdle, the last thing we would attempt in the industry, because it's the hardest. Anytime you try and put controls around data, it breaks workflows, it hurts productivity, it makes it harder to work with partners. It's just really tough to do.
It's arguably the most important and yes, the hardest thing, because you can't lock data up in some sort of safe. Because then people can't, like you said, so it can either be safe or secure, and there has to be some happy middle ground. But I'm not sure.
And that's exactly what people have tried to do, is to lock it. I mean, that's what PGP is, right? Lock it up in a safe, and with your public key, and then you'll be able to decrypt it. And we've seen variations of that over the years. Like I remember Watchdocs had a bunch of competitors that did similar things where it was basically like PGP, but it happened more transparently in the background. It was more user-friendly, but still, if you shared with somebody outside your organization, they would have to go through these steps where they have to download and install the Watchdog software, and then they somehow have to get the secret key. Like you leave them a voicemail or something like that. Like you still have this painful, long drawn out thing that they need to go through just to look at their, just to receive their pen test report. Like you might as well have just sent it in the mail or something like that at that point.
Yeah, I mean, years ago, I remember writing, I was working for a brief stint outside of security and writing a report about this technology where it was basically, this quote, ironclad safe to put your sensitive documents in. And they had done a survey, and we were interpreting the results, and we were writing about that and why this is really important, not only for security, but for business resiliency. And the theory was fantastic. But the whole time I was writing this paper, I kept thinking, oh my God, if I had to go to my lockbox at my bank, for instance, every time I needed whatever widget I needed, I'd be pretty annoyed. It would be really time consuming, and it would be safe when it was in there, but the second I take it out, it's unsafe too. Yeah,
sorry, today's a bank holiday. You can't.
Right.
Well, Some of those safety boxes are like self-service, where you have a key to get in and then another key to get into your box. But still, yeah, the inconvenience, especially in this age of just even with the downturn, like we're still seeing a ton of VC capital being deployed. You just can't afford to slow down that much.
Nope.
All right. So a couple other interesting ones. I should ask before I go to the next one, any particular funding or acquisition items here that you guys found interesting? No? Okay. Yeah, I mean, if nothing leaps out. I found Axio kind of interesting. And I think this is the one where basically they build out hypotheticals. And is this the right one? I might be getting it mixed up.
Axio is a cyber risk one, and it must be Kismet because we also have BitSight on the...
Yeah. Yeah, so the idea here is you can create a hypothetical, like what happens if we get hit with ransomware, and you've already plugged in enough data that actually gives you like an estimate. Or I assume it's going to be like a range on losses on an incident like that. So this is also something you can use to make sure that you have appropriate insurance policies, that are going to cover these possible events. So I thought this was kind of a different and interesting approach to it. I don't know how much of it is manual and just presented to you in a SaaS tool, or how much of it is self-driven, because it looks like they do some services as well.
Well, if you're getting, I mean, as a Series B, I'd sort of hope by now that they're doing a little less manual and they've got a little more automation going on in here. I think it's we're seeing this across a few things now. Same as we were talking about the data protection stuff being sort of a second generation. I think this is a little bit too, and in that before we did just have like a standard rule set and it'd fall through, and now of course everything has to have a little bit of the machine learning going on. So it'd be interesting to sort of, I don't know if you've seen a demo of this or if they've got something on YouTube. I haven't had a chance to look, but it'd be interesting to see a little closer what their story is.
They have an animated explainer, so even better.
Perfect.
That's my speed.
Yeah, I love these. I love the little animated explainers. But yeah, I'm interested to learn a bit more as well. And then
to jump to, I think we might want to come. Well, I don't know. Do we want to talk about BitSight at the same time as that, and sort of get those two?
Yeah, and I think Lumu might be along the same lines as well.
So many tabs. So much news.
Lumu's all about like risk analysis. It's all about how do they describe it here? They call it a compromise assessment. So again, this is what's it going to look like if you get hit by ransomware? Helping you with some numbers. Put some actual tangible numbers around that and prepare for that.
Yeah, that's these guys caught my mind. It's funny, I'm looking at these from the venture side. Know Before is sort of interesting to see here. So probably most of us, we think Know Before, we think Kevin Mitnick. They've been growing nicely over the years as an education play, a security education play. They're dipping their toes into the corporate investment, as you see here. So
they're huge. They're huge now. So yeah, they can do all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
The budget's not huge, but it's there. So they're putting their name in, and it's all, or they're checking, and it's sort of a little bit of a let's try and make sure we have some integration with these different products sort of future. I think it's going to be interesting to see. It takes a while for this type of thing to play out. So I'm curious to see where it's going to be in 2 or 3 years. But yeah, they're definitely out there looking and trying to figure out how can they help and make connections.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see. Anything else interesting here?
So I wanted to bring up one more, not to, and this could be a very quick conversation or a longer conversation. ZeroFox went public. In a SPAC. And I think you listen to them also, Adrian. I'm a big fan of TechCrunch's Equity Pod.
I do.
And what those guys are not a fan of is SPAC IPOs. So I don't know. I'm sort of curious to have the conversation. Curious from your two guys' point of view. Okay, well, congratulations, Zero Fox. You know, I'm not here to bash on you, but at least over the last year or so, this form of IPO hasn't been wildly successful. So I'm just sort of curious if you guys had any thoughts on that.
So in their defense, you know, this process started, the SPAC process, before everyone was notified that SPACs were not cool anymore, and the SEC started to put in some new rules around it. You know, because there are a lot of, you know, just complete dumpster fires. Like, I forget what percentage of SPACs in 2021 and 2020 ended up backing out. You know, like being undone. You know, within weeks or months in some cases, but it was more than a few. I also listened to the All In podcast, and I forget which one of those guys was real big on SPACs, and he gets teased about it, you know, because just, you know, this approach of going public just ended up not working all that well, you know, and too many people were using it as a way to get around the diligence, you know, to not have to go through the S1 process, and yeah, it bit them in the butt. So I don't know. I mean, only time will tell. You know, if this works. You know, I don't know a whole lot about Zero Fox. You know, they've been haven't heard a whole lot about them. They're fairly unique. They don't really have a whole lot of competition in this one very specific area of digital reputation, digital risk monitoring and management that they do. That's kind of like a subset of attack surface monitoring. So, you know, they're kind of unique. So I've no idea how this is going to go. It's interesting that part of this is they're going to be merged with IDX, which is a privacy and identity protection platform, which totally makes sense for what they do. You know, that just that gives them more of the kind of full customer life cycle of protecting high profile individuals.
So is that okay? It's not a reverse merger. I saw IDF in there. I hadn't quite realized they're part of that. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm sort of similar to you. I know Zero Fox from seeing them at the trade shows, which is not good on my part. But yeah, I could see how that works with IDX though. I hope they do well.
It almost feels like a private equity deal where, you know, private equity finds something that still has pretty good growth, but, you know, not a whole lot of direction or needs some strategic help. And they smush them together with other things that are adjacent to it and take them public. And that's kind of what this looks like. That's kind of how this presents. So. Yeah, I don't know. Again, time will tell. $1.4 billion transaction. I don't know why it took over 8 months for this to happen. You know, it's like that really threw me. I had to do some extra research last night because I was, you know, when you look up the story, you find stories from December 2021 and from a week ago. You're like, wait, what? Like. I know acquisitions take a while to close, but these SPAC things usually just happen overnight. And yeah, no, apparently not.
I wonder if they're waiting for the market to warm up.
Could be. I don't know. Could be they saw the down. I have no idea. There's probably a story behind that, but I don't know what it is. You mentioned BitSight. So I'm trying to remember what third-party trust does. But
I was looking at this earlier. Where'd that tab go? Sorry. There you go. I lost a tab.
Okay. Yeah. So this is okay. Yeah. So BitSight. You know, I think most people are familiar with what they do. They scan the whole internet. They try to attribute that stuff to individual companies, and they give you a score on it. And it's it's usually not 100% correct. And the vendor that receives that score usually has to do most of the work of correcting the false positives and stuff like that, reporting all that and getting it corrected. And the third-party trust side of this, I think, is there's a bunch of companies out there that are trying to automate, and deduplicate a lot of the work around vendor management. That's mostly, can you send me a copy of your SOC 2? Can you fill out this questionnaire? That kind of stuff. Automating that kind of work and trying to deduplicate it so that every company you do business with. So like CyberGRX, some people are familiar with that one. Do it once, share it many is kind of the model here. But the only problem is you can't do it once if one set of third parties that you work with is using CyberGRX, another set of them is using third-party trust, and then there's at least half a dozen more that all want to do this third-party once, share many model. So when it's a whole category with competitors in it, it doesn't really work if it's not a monopoly, And
it partially comes down to the info you put into these things. I'm still sort of active in the Apache Software Foundation, or at least some other mailing lists. And one of the mailing lists I'm on, some company out there, they're using not this product, but one of their competitors, and they've mentioned that Apache is one of their dependencies. So every month or two, we get this email from this product saying, "Hey, you need to log in and update your vendor status." We're like, "What are you doing?" So it's there's uses to them. But it's still it's like any of these things in security, right? It doesn't completely solve it. It's like you still have to use the sort of brain thing to sort of figure out how you use these things. But I think, at least in general, while I agree with you, they're not. They don't allow you to just close your eyes and it's all done and everyone uses the same product, or at least a protocol or something. But it does make it significantly easier. If you ever go to a purchasing person in a larger organization, enterprise, and say, "Hey, tell me about this," yeah, it's almost like a trigger warning.
Yeah, and I mean, even you got things like Cyclone DX if you want to do standardize an SBOM or something like that. But even there, like it's even within that, people are going to have their custom Cyclone DX configuration, and with with the questionnaires. There's standards for those questionnaires, but everybody builds their own custom version, because some questions are important to them, others are not. That's just the nature of businesses. Everybody's risk tolerance and what they're interested in varies based on their business, on the people that work there, on how they see and manage risk. So, to some extent, you're always going to have some kind of custom questionnaire there, I think. Maybe we can reduce it, and we can reduce the amount of labor to get that done. But yeah, to some extent, you're always going to see interns filling out spreadsheets.
I would still call this
and saying yes to all the things, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the sales guys do that too. I think I'd still call this space young, the automation of this, right? So I suspect over the next, again, it looks like I'm 2 or 3 years guy today. I suspect over the next few years, we're going to see some of these solutions get better answers to them, and probably some more acquisitions as well. So there's a need. It's a pain point, so people will keep working on it.
Yep. All right. So Flashpoint was an interesting one. They got picked up by a private equity firm about a year ago and have made 2 acquisitions since then. They acquired Risk-Based Security, which has like a virtual CISO tool, has one of the biggest vulnerability managed, or how should I say it? Vulnerability databases. Yeah, that's the right way to say it. So VulnDB. It's like like the CVD, similar to NVD CVD, and so interesting the path that they're taking here. Pulling in these other intelligence companies, because vulnerability intelligence wasn't something I would think of combining with like a more traditional threat intelligence organization or vendor. But yeah, makes sense. It's you can pair up a lot of that data. It's good context to have. To have a company that has a large vulnerability database, and the latest one, EchoSec, I guess also pulls in some OSINT data, so external attack surface type stuff, which I would have thought Flashpoint already had, but maybe it fills a gap that they had. So I don't know.
And we don't know how big the acquisition is, so it could have been for the talent also.
Well, that's something we've been monitoring for a while. Is we knew the downturn on valuations would make this a buyer's market, and we are seeing a whole lot more acquisitions, since this downturn began.
I see. Looking through their product, looking really briefly through Flashpoint's platform, it seems like they're trying to play a little bit into Zero Fox space to sort of bring those two together. They've got a brand exposure as well. So it's I don't know. It'd be interesting if anyone's for those who are on Discord, if you've used these third-party vuln databases. I've looked at them in the past from the point of view of as a security vendor. I need to either build my own vulnerability database and do what these guys are doing and sort of cobble that together, or I need to pay someone for that. And I know the larger enterprises will use this as part of their threat intel. So I'd be sort of curious to see if any of our listeners are using these or how they're using them or what they think of them.
Yeah, so the general idea is with the vulnerability database that they have is you can go in there and you can subscribe to the software you use, the different libraries, the different open source and commercial tools, and then they just alert you, when a new vulnerability comes out, which is kind of flipped from depending on a scanner to go out and discover those vulnerabilities. Because the problem with that is a scheduled scan, maybe that runs 7 days after this vulnerability is first announced. You probably want to know about it sooner than just the next time your scheduled scan runs and comes back and tells you about it.
Mm-hmm.
So removes a bottleneck there, going that route in detecting this stuff. And they also claim to have something like 30% more vulnerabilities than NVD, than the US vulnerability database.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, really what it comes down to when I've seen these is the quality of the data. And as you were saying, how quickly they put it in there, right? So I would hope most of our listeners are scanning more than every 7 days at this point, but I realize that's a hope, not reality.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, it's
in most cases, no. Like weekly is pretty normal. From all the I talk to a couple companies a week through the work I do with IONS, and weekly is about the norm.
Still, wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is, as I said, we all have our little bubbles. I live in my little cloud native bubble where like everything gets scanned on every CI build and like that type of thing. So
everything's transactional, right? Yeah.
Yes, I'm in my little unicorn world.
Yeah, instead of these point in time audits. I know some companies that scan once a quarter, and it's because they don't really depend on the scans to tell them what's vulnerable. They have different processes in place. So the scan is more of a, hey, let us know if we have any gaps, and to your point, that's how they manage things. They're actually looking for vulnerabilities throughout many steps of the development life cycle, and the DAST and network scans and that kind of stuff is more of a just let us know if we missed anything. Let's see. Speaking of which, Run Zero, Rumble rebranded as Run Zero. So Rumble, the asset discovery scanner that was HD Moore's new project after he left Rapid7 working on Metasploit. He started Rumble, and amazing tool, probably the most accurate asset discovery tool out there. So good stuff there. they're just growing by leaps and bounds. Like just reading their release notes, I get their newsletters because I use the free version of their product, and it's crazy. They've got all kinds of integrations now, so they integrate with a lot of the other vulnerability management tools out there in both directions. I thought number 14, accepting crypto. I thought this was an interesting one by Shodan's founder, where he's experimented with taking crypto as payment for Shodan services for their memberships on and off. And it's about what you would expect. Like, more people want them to accept crypto just to, give crypto more credibility and say, hey, look, no, you can spend it on real things in real life. And, then most of the people that screamed about them taking crypto didn't actually buy their services with crypto. So in reality, no, accepting crypto is, at least in their case, more trouble than it's worth. Because when things go south, people sent their crypto they sent it to the wrong account. They started getting scams. And when people pay in PayPal and stuff like that, they don't see all these scams, but the moment cryptocurrency is involved, it's just like this whole bubble of scamminess just kind of, it's a magnet for it, right? It's a magnet for trouble.
The interesting thing about, and Katie, I keep talking here, so feel free to shut us off. But the interesting thing here about this space is there's a very small group of I don't want to say crypto bros because it's more than that, but there's a very small group of crypto enthusiasts, we'll go with that word, that are very loud. And that in the past got people to put this stuff into place. But now, as you're saying, as the market's sort of going downhill, maybe not looking quite so great. The interesting part, and so there's, again, I've seen this covered other places in the last week or two. There's a lot of e-commerce sites which are starting to remove the accepting Bitcoin from their site. But what was interesting about the Shodan article is he actually talks about, from a developer point of view, about it wasn't easy to integrate this, because frequently what you're seeing with Coinbase, whoever else, Stripe, they're claiming that, marketing, right? You want to quickly say, hey, we've got support for coins. But they haven't actually done the integration that tight compared to it's a first generation. So they have the ability to take it, but then that doesn't really connect back to the account which was created in Shodan. So there's a lot of manual work to update their license and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting to see in there. But yeah, it's a bit of an FX game, right? How to take the money in Bitcoin or whatever, and then quickly put it into something you consider stable.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, John, because we know how to do retail transactions. We know how to do gift cards and things like that, and it is interesting to see that when you try and take cryptocurrency, like, they haven't thought through at least the payment gateways, the places that are going to handle these payments haven't really figured that out yet. So that is an additional barrier to accepting this. Oh, right. Anything else worth talking about here before we get to the squirrel story? I'm not sure how much time you guys have.
The squirrel one's good. What I think is worth a few seconds of our time. I can't remember if you've talked about Zero Trust recently. And this is the mesh security gets 4.5 mil in a seed round. Congrats to them. And I think for those of us sort of, balancing both the enterprise and the startup world, security startup vendor world, this is a really good example of folks wanting to build a company around new tech. So when
they're killing me with the term, though, Zero Trust posture management. Come on,
it's like serverless. I know. I just
I read this and I thought, all right, I know Tyler, who's not here this week, so we can rag on him and he can listen to it later. He hates Zero Trust. He hates the idea. He hates the term. He's anti-Zero Trust, probably mostly from the marketing point of view. But this is why. This is exactly why. They're taking something that is, first of all, they're saying it's new. It's not new. The idea is not new. And even the implementation of it is not new. But they're taking it and I'll kindly say adopting it to sell a product versus building a product that helps achieve an approach, a framework, a strategy. And this company's technology might be great, but I think we're all skeptical enough in security that when we see something like this, it's like, whoa, wait, what are you doing with this? Why are you turning it into this term that you're hoping the analyst firms are going to adopt, and then it'll be attributed to you?
Yeah, I'm curious to track down where that actual phrase came from, zero trust.
It's well documented.
I'm sure it is.
It's a long history. It comes initially from the Jericho Forum, where they started talking about a perimeterless world, and then John Kindervag, when he was back at Forrester, initially he was the one who coined the term, but that was back in like 2009, 2010, and it didn't really catch on for a really long time. But the impetus for that goes back. So it's not like even when he coined the term, but it was based on other ideas because the network perimeter had been dissolving for many, many years.
Yeah, it's gone through. Yeah, it wasn't until I think he went to maybe Palo Alto. Honestly, it was Google, I think, did the most for zero trust without using the term zero trust. Yep. They called it beyond.
They just called it beyond trust.
But and part of the reason is they they documented how they did it, and they were very clear about what it was and what the steps were that they went through, and they did this nice short 45 minute talk that you could go watch. And you're like, oh, okay, I understand Beyond Core. There's this short 7-page paper that you could read. Whereas with Zero Trust, there was just so much marketing rolled up in it. Like it was hard to find a clear definition of what it was.
And this has been sort of what has I'm glad to see I hit a nerve here, but this has been sort of what has sort of been the nails in a chalkboard for me, right? It's like if you think about ZTNA, the actual network architecture side of this, or that part of things, where a lot of the security nerds hang out, or some do. It's this concept, but it's like as a smaller, even medium-sized company, I've always said, well, that's cool. How do I do this, right? So I thought that was what was interesting about there's. Well, hell, I know at least 3 startups in the space right now. There's probably 10. But they saw this idea coming out, I'm guessing, if you just think about how a startup works. They saw this idea coming about a year and a half ago, and they're like, we can turn this into a business. So that's where you're now starting to see guys like these guys getting funding for this. Because I think that there's a pain point out there. There's a lot of people that have read all this marketing material or media coverage, and they're like, well, I obviously need that. Which box does that come in? And so now you've got these guys doing this type of thing.
So you both have seen the article here on Calculus Tech. What's your take on what mesh security does from that? Even if you've read other stuff, based on that article, what's your take on what they do?
Fancy VPN.
So fancy, zero trust network access, basically, right? Like creating a tunnel into something without, exposing something to the public internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what they actually do is email security.
Oh my God.
They have an email
they don't
security
say email
gateway.
Anywhere.
They don't.
They don't. I mean, I'm rereading it. I read it this morning.
Go to their website, meshsecurity.io, unless these are 2 companies with the same name, which I should check on because that, that could be that. Oh my God, do we have 2 companies with the same name? Because these guys, mesh security,
some bad research or lack thereof. Mesh security.
Because these guys are Israeli, but Mesh Security
Mesh Security IO, Mesh Security
they're based in Ireland. Do we have 2 companies with the same name? What's Mesh Security's website then?
Well,
Mesh Security IO is email security redefined for MSPs.
They must not have a public site, because if you search, at least when I search Google for Mesh Security Zero Trust, it's not on the first page.
Y'all, before you pick your company names and brands, do some Google searching. Please. Like this is bad.
Oh, I got a link. Mesh.security.
It's mesh.security?
Yeah. So they paid more for their domain.
They did. That's a couple $1,000 right there.
Ooh.
Wow. So two security companies with the same exact name. And it's looking a lot like meshsecurity.io had their name a lot longer. Zero Trust Posture Management.
Discover your crown jewels and rapidly identify and remove the critical risks.
Oh, I don't know what they're doing.
Holistic, contextual and actionable analysis of your entire X as a service estate, agentless and seamless deployment that connects to any footprint and translates Zero Trust-ish into English. I don't even know what that means.
They are seed stage, so I don't want to be too hard on them. But yeah, the messaging is very difficult to unravel and understand here. But yeah, that's really bad that you picked a name for your company and didn't Google that name. Because if I'm not even using Google, I'm using Brave's search here. But when I search for mesh security, very first thing I get is meshsecurity.io. There's no excuse for having a name collision in an industry as small as ours, with less than 3,000 vendors.
Well, I'm thinking they probably did, because otherwise they would have taken meshsecurity.com, meshsecurity.io, but they went with mesh.security, and the .securities are a lot less popular.
Well, because they're super expensive. Like a .io is like $30.
But they're also not, because people don't use them, people don't think of them as immediately as they do .com, .io, .org, .edu, etc.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what the company does. I can't figure it out from this, but yeah, it's pretty bad that we had to hunt that much to find their website.
Maybe if we go back to our first segment here, we could we could have Ryan help us with threat hunting and find where this came from.
Or we could do the OS int over with the other vendor.
With Flashpoint and third party.
Yeah, I mean, generally where I go, the source of truth is often Crunchbase, but sometimes even with seed stage companies, you don't see them there. But generally you do, and that's where I found their domain name was Crunchbase, which has some useful details there. But all right, yeah. So conclusion: I don't know what they do, and they need to change your name. I mean, that sucks having to rebrand that early, but they're going to run into problems. People are going to be very confused. They're going to be like, like your demo was great, but I went to your website and I already have Proofpoint or Mimecast. Like I don't need you guys.
I mean, from the start point of view, though, honestly, frequently, I mean, no, it's seed, so it's not pre-seed. I've been heard before many times to say, I don't care what we name it, just start working on it and we'll figure out the name later. So they might have done that. I don't know. I'm trying to give them.
I've worked with more than one Israeli startup that had a name collision. Like this is common for me. Back when I was at 451, I ran into that often. Like I would jump on a call with them, and I usually do research before jumping on a briefing with a new company. And I tell them, look, IBM has a product with the same name as your company, and you're not going to win an SEO battle with IBM, so you're going to have to change it. So I don't know how or why it happens. I mean, yeah, what you're saying there, I guess just pick something like, well, if there's a problem, we'll fix it later. Maybe that's the general consensus, but it just seems painful because they already have
to rebrand. And speaking of rebranding, Rumble just rebranded, and they did a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort. So it's not like rebranding your company name is just a snap decision.
So there is a saving grace here. If you look at the article, you look at the photo of the employees, the shirts just have an M on them. The shirts don't say mesh security. It's just an M. So they just have to pick another M word.
Well, that's true.
And they can keep most of their branding. It's very attractive branding. I love the M logo. But yeah, mesh security was taken. All right, let's jump to the. There were two Amazon ones here, but we could skip those. Do you trust Amazon with your medical records? And the AWS CISO taking a bit of a victory lap with Microsoft and Azure having so many security problems lately. It's kind of that was my read on number 16. So he's not wrong, but I do feel like he's just taken a victory lap as Azure struggles with a lot of these cross-tenant tenant breaking issues that they've had.
Yeah.
But yes, the squirrel story, a group of nostalgia enthusiasts have reverse engineered Prodigy, which shockingly, Prodigy when I was younger, it seemed like it had been around forever, but Prodigy only existed for 11 years. I had no idea. I had not realized that.
Those years just seemed that long to us when we were younger.
I guess it was like 1988 to 2001 or something. 1989 to 2001, I think, is how long it existed. But yeah, there was a time when like half the people I knew had Prodigy. It was like the Comcast of the day, But for whatever reason, they reverse engineered it, rebuilt it, and I'm guessing there's not a whole lot of details on the website at this point. But I'm guessing you can grab a modem and dial into Prodigy.
It sounds like, I was looking at earlier, it sounds like you get an IP client of some type. Maybe they had that towards the end in 2001 when things were going, that internet thing was coming. But yeah, it feels like this site tells the story. And these guys have done quite a lot of effort to reverse engineer this with like looking at the patents and getting a client and trying to figure out the communication. But now what?
It's just kind of a fun project to share. It's just a passion project, right?
I really don't want to. I'm not trying to rail on these guys because, like, I know at some point, I'll have spare time on my hands and I'm going to start, reverse engineering. I don't know. I'll be the only person with a MacBook Pro or something in like 10 or 20 years, and like I know I'm going to start doing that type of thing and have interest in it. So more power to them. Okay.
So you can dial into Prodigy and you can access your GeoCities page because GeoCities is also back.
God.
Like not as a hey, look at this nostalgic thing type of joke, but it's an actual like Wix competitor now, I think. Like Wix and Squarespace type service. Am I getting that mixed up with Angel Fire?
No, I don't think you are.
One of those came back as like a legit.
Yeah, I think GeoCities came back a few months ago. Yahoo GeoCities. But I thought it returned because I thought I saw this in the news too.
Maybe it was Angel Fire. Because I'm not finding GeoCities, but I did find angelfire.lycos.com exists, and you can go build a website.
What was the line?
And it says
Lycos?
It's angelfire.lycos.com, and you can go to, and the copyright in the footer is 2022. And if you mouse over the hot air balloon on the front page, it wiggles. I need to be able to share my screen, Gus. We need to work on that. Every now and then, there's just something worth sharing. Anyway, yep. So I think we'll see a lot more of that. I've heard people say nostalgia, like that point typically hits around 20, 25 years. So you'll actually see it with, like one day I realized my 90s video game collection was worth tons of money. You know, like I realized I had like 13 grand worth of video game stuff because I went to a site that priced everything based off of what it was actually selling for in eBay and automatically updates those prices. So I took a weekend, pulled all my stuff out of storage, you know, cleaned it up, made sure it saw if it was working or not, put it in there. And yeah, all my 90s video game stuff is worth tons of money. And I sold like a third of it for like $3 grand. And yeah, so I think we're going to continue seeing this because we're right at that 25, 30 year mark where the internet started to become a thing. So it'll be interesting to see what other stuff comes back, either like a commercial thing, like people trying to, reboot brands, like Radio Shack is apparently like an NFT crypto site now. We're going to keep seeing that. I think the 90s are going to continue popping up in squirrel stories for the foreseeable future.
I'm looking forward to the Kubernetes retro computing site in about 20 years.
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead and find the domains. Figure out the domains now. As projects die, go and grab those domains so that you can be prepared in 20 years. It'll be worth like $100 grand. All right. Thanks, Katie and John, so much for joining me today. Today was fun.
Thanks for having us. Amber's tiptoeing around here, so she says it's time for dinner.
Time for dinner. For us too. For us humans also. All right. Big thanks to everybody for watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We will see you next week.